Thank you for joining us this evening for our debate that we have for our two Republican candidates for Commonwealth Attorney. This evening we have with us Justin Johnson and we have Sarah Bryant, who will be debating questions that were submitted by citizens in the county. 2 minutes to close at the conclusion of questions. We will start. The first question will go to Mr. Johnson, who will have 2 minutes to respond. As candidates of Commonwealth's Attorney, what unique qualifications and experiences do you bring to the table, and what motivates you to seek this crucial role in shaping our community's criminal justice system?
Well, I think one of the most unique qualifications, I've currently served as the assistant to me by the current Commonwealth's Attorney, Richie Bottoms, who has served in that role for approximately 24 years. I think in terms of what motivates me, biggest thing, that I want to, as a prosecutor, I want to make sure that our community is one of the safest communities in our state, because frankly, I want it to be an Avenue Baptist Church. I genuinely have a passion for this community and want to see the best that this community has to offer. So that's one of the bigger motivators that I have.
Next answer will be Sarah Bryant.
Thank you. I think I'm uniquely qualified for this position because I've been practicing almost exclusively in criminal law for almost 17 years now. I spent 14 years as a public defender, and I started my career in the public defender's office in Richmond before I worked in Eastern Kentucky, and then I was able to come back home to my hometown in 2015. My experience as a public defender has given me a broad array of experience. I often say I should write a book because I've seen a lot, and I've DUIs to murder cases. I've also done work on death penalty cases. Unfortunately, we don't get a lot of those in our communities, but should something horrific like that happen, I have the training and I have the experience that it takes to prosecute those cases. My motivation for seeking this job is, as I said, I've been practicing criminal law for almost 17 years now. I love criminal law. I love what I do. I've been prosecuting as assistant county attorney for Chris Herron for almost 2 years now. I love being in the courtroom. I love working with our law enforcement officers, our other community members, Shepherd's House, Altieri. I love collaborating with everyone in order to try to do the best job to keep our community safe. And I feel with my experience, attorney.
Thank you. Our next question will be answered first by Sarah Bryant and then come to Justin Johnson. Many voters are uncertain what role the attorneys for Boyle and Mercer counties as you see it.
As I've been going door to door meeting people over the past several months, I found that a lot of people that are not involved in the court system don't understand the difference between county attorney and Commonwealth attorney, or really what's going on in the court system in general. And one thing that I've really enjoyed doing during my campaign is making videos. I've been making several videos of different topics of what is the difference between Commonwealth and county attorney. What is a grand jury versus petit jury? And to me, the three roles of the Commonwealth Attorney's Office is first to work with law enforcement in presenting cases to the grand jury for indictment. The second is prosecuting those cases once they've been indicted in circuit court. And to me, the third main thing about the role of Commonwealth Attorney is to educate the public, to educate the law enforcement officers, because law is always evolving and always changing. Every year, our legislators enact new laws that affect us. And every month, every week, there's cases that come out from the United States Supreme Court to the Kentucky Supreme Court and Court of Appeals. And I feel that it's our job as prosecutors to make sure that the men and women that are out there on the streets know what these changes are in order that these cases can be prosecuted correctly so that people aren't getting dismissals or acquittals through loopholes. So to me, education is the third greatest part of being Commonwealth Attorney.
Sarah kind of touched on some of the most important roles, that being, prosecuting individuals that are indicted, as well as presenting the cases to the grand jury. But so I'd touch on a couple of other different roles. One of those is the Commonwealth Attorney's Office is active. We're a member of the drug court team. That's a good program that we've started about 2 years ago. The Commonwealth Attorney's Office has a representative, a voting member on that team, and I think that's been a good program that we've implemented here. They say nationally the success rate is 33%. However, locally we see that we see probably better results than we are seeing nationally. So I think being able to serve in that role on the drug court team is one of the more important roles. Another role that Sarah kind of touched on is the education of letting officers know what the updated case law is. And I think but I kind of expound on that is being available for the officers. You know, a couple weeks ago I met with the Harrodsburg Police Department, one of their roll calls, just to talk with them and say, what can I do to better serve you all? I'd like to, as Commonwealth's attorney, do that with all of the police departments and just kind of get their opinion, talk with them. But also I let them know whenever I was there is that I want to be available to you. Just last week I had one of those officers call me at 3 in the morning and he apologized, but I said, no, this is when you're supposed to call me. I want you to call me now before there's an issue that comes. A different officer call me. So it's just being available for our officers to answer those questions, to take care of an issue before it becomes even worse. And I think the other thing is advocating for our victims, making sure that they know that their voice is heard and that we give them a voice to the court and let them know what their position is on certain things. So I think it's educating, being available for our officers, as well as advocating for our victims, and I believe that's
Thank you. Our next question, which will be answered first by Justin Johnson, is you are both seeking the nomination to run as the Republican candidate for Commonwealth's attorney, but you both spent at least a portion of your life registered as Democrats. Please articulate when you joined.
when I turned 18, but a Republican candidates, back when Republican was kind of a bad word around this community. And so then, but I guess legally when I turned 18, I became a Republican. And when I went to college, I joined the College Republicans while I was there. When I went to law school, I was a member of the Federalist Society. When I came back to Danville and Boyle County, it was suggested to me that if I wanted to be involved with local government, that I probably needed to register as a Democrat during that time. However, when it came time and it was apparent that I was going to be running for this office, I talked with my wife and just talked about what my values were, and I believe that the Republicans joined the party that I started with ever since I was a kid.
I switched parties probably around the first of the year, January 2023. And I'm going to be very personal with you all as to why I switched parties. In 2021, in the middle of COVID, I turned 40 years old. And when I turned 40, between that and COVID, it made me reevaluate a lot of things in my life. It made me want to think about where I was in life, what I wanted, what I saw my future as. I left my job as a public defender, and I went through a lot of other personal changes as well. And then I started working in the Boyle County Attorney's Office. And my boss is a Republican, Chris Herron. And working for Chris, I got to really sit down with him and talk about his ideas and his philosophies on things. And through Chris, I was able to meet other people through the Republican Party than I thought I would. And I had a lot more in common with them than I would have thought I did 5 years ago. And Tom Tighe sends these emails pretty regularly, and he has on those emails the numbers of how many people are registered Democrats and how many people are registered Republican parties, because there's a national, local trend of people switching parties because they want to see a different way of how things are being done. And to me, it shows that I'm open-minded to for most of my life.
Thank you. Please define the concept of prosecutorial discretion for those listening, and explain how you view your role in decisions based on prosecutorial discretion if you become Commonwealth Attorney.
So prosecutorial cases, whether it's in terms of offering someone a diversion and offering probation or time in custody to serve or fines. And I use my prosecutorial discretion by evaluating each case. If you know me pretty well, you would look at my dockets that I do for each court date. I have these organized charts where I go through and I look at each case. I look at someone's criminal history. I look at if they're on bond on another case and they got a new one. I look at if they're on probation or parole, how many felon contacts served. So I would use that same philosophy. If elected people involved.
What bond that individual should face if they're a violent offender, and in my
And the right to speedy trial.
criminal defendant invokes that right, it's on us to meet with our victim, talk with them, and explain what that means exactly and what the next step is going to be. If it's all in further, and maybe we need to hire an expert for not going to be the best thing for this situation, but if the judge still overrules us and rules that the trial is set, then we need to be able to communicate that with our victim and let them know, okay, the judge has ruled this way. So I think you know, it is a balancing act. We got to explain sometimes our victims, they don't necessarily victim as well as protecting that individual. So I think it is a balancing act, but it's one that I'm always going to lean on the side of the victim to make sure that you got to do is you got to just make sure it's effective communication with the victim.
I know that at the end of the day, I'm not going to make everyone happy. Either a defendant's not going to be happy with me, and I kind of hope that they're not, or the victim isn't going to be happy with me. I try to, of course, lean more towards the side of the victim, and we do a good job in our office of educating our victims. Our victims advocate, she's got an office cell phone, and she's texting, she's calling, she's emailing our victims to let them know, hey, the defendants that I found is people just want to be heard. They want to know that someone's listening to them and to explain what's going on. They may not always be happy with what you have to say, but as long as you're open and honest about that communication, balance everything in court.
Which is of greater concern to you, the prospect of losing a trial involving a defendant you believe was guilty, or the idea of, sorry, I'm in the wrong spot, of securing a conviction against someone who may have been innocent?
In prison. I guess part of me, even with all these years, I'm still naive enough to believe in the system. It's not a perfect system, but it's the best system that we have. And I feel like if an innocent person is convicted, then I didn't do my job right. If a guilty person is acquitted, then I know that at the bottom of my heart and at the end of the day, I did everything I could to try to secure that conviction. And people have a right to a jury trial. That's why we have 12 peers to decide these cases and to hear the evidence. That's why it's not me making that decision or a defense attorney. You know, we have judges and we have juries that make those decisions, and sometimes you win a case and sometimes you don't. That's the way the system works. So for me, I think that the worst case scenario is someone that's innocent spending time in jail or being convicted for a crime they didn't do, because then the system hasn't worked and somehow I've failed.
I'll 100% agree with Sarah. I would, you know, before the last 2 weeks, we've had jury orientation for a new jury panel. And during that process, we select 16 new lucky individuals to be our grand jurors. But then we take them to a room, and Mr. Bottoms and I orientate them about the grand jury process and explain what that process is. One of the things we always tell them is that we're never going to bring you a case unless we 110% believe that that individual is guilty. And we continue that, and we've always done that, because frankly, at the end of the day, how am I supposed to stand in front of 12 individuals and try to convince them that this person is guilty if I don't fully believe that they're guilty? If I think that they're innocent, then what am I doing? I'm not doing my job is what I'm not doing. And so with the trial, you're dealing with 12 strangers that come from very different backgrounds. And that's why you go to a jury trial. And it might be just a technicality. Maybe there was an issue with how the evidence was collected or something. Maybe there was something wrong that, you know, maybe a juror is hung up on that, and they just think that's enough for reasonable doubt. It's not necessarily saying if there's a not guilty, it's not saying that that person did not do it, but it's just saying that the evidence presented, if there's an issue with it, that they're just saying, you know what, there is reasonable doubt that this individual committed this act, and therefore I don't think that they should be found guilty. So at the end of the day, I would much rather lose a case and have somebody found not guilty than put an innocent person in prison.
Prison overpopulation and the cost of incarceration are serious concerns in the state of Kentucky. Do you feel that a prosecutor should consider these issues when considering making an offer to a defendant?
Short answer is no, because I think the issue of, it is a huge issue, prison overpopulation and incarceration. It is huge. I think that the cost of incarceration is astronomical. But I think that's an issue that that should be left to the legislature, because my job is to enforce the laws that are handed to me from the legislature. If I were to take into account whether, oh, well, the jail is pretty overcrowded, I don't know if this individual that committed assault, I don't know. No, that person needs to be behind bars, and we need to figure out a way that that person will serve their time. So I think in terms of prison overpopulation and incarceration, I'm not doing my duty if I take that into consideration. I need to make sure that the victim's voice is heard and that that victim receives justice. So, again, my answer is no.
I agree, no. I'm sorry, Brian Walford, I see you back there, the Boyle County jailer. But no, I don't take that into consideration because as Commonwealth Attorney, my job is to protect the public. I don't want to look at a victim and say, ma'am, I'm sorry, I know that your husband beat you and strangled you, but the jail's overcrowded, so I had the job of protecting our community, and I leave a lot of the prevention in their very capable hands. But in terms of protecting the community, I think as Commonwealth Attorney, my responsibility is to make sure violent offenders remain in jail, that someone doesn't hurt a baby and break their ribs and fracture their skull and get probation, or someone stabs somebody else and gets out on an ROR bond. My job is to make sure that the violent offenders are in jail, that the repeat offenders are in jail, and that they're treated accordingly. We have the persistent felony offender, or PFO statute, to use so that people that habitually commit crimes over and over again get a more harsher punishment than someone that's a first-time offender. And also our enhanced statutes, like someone that's trafficked drugs on protect the community as Commonwealth Attorney.
You know, at the Commonwealth Attorneys Conference, I've mentioned it before, that the Attorney General Russell Coleman spoke, and the theme of his speech was effective collaboration. He reiterated that over and over, and what he was referring to is more of between the Attorney General, anything from them, they're always willing to help us. But I think that where that comes from the top down to Commonwealth attorneys, I would like to extend that out to the community. You know, it takes effective collaboration amongst community organizations, getting your nonprofits, getting your church leaders involved, government agencies. You know, I mean, I know they say it takes a village, and it really does, to help with crime prevention and to maintain the safety of our community. You know, we have a safe community here in Danville and Mercer. Yes, we have our issues, but overall, it is a very safe community, and I want to continue doing that work that was started by Mr. Bottoms. But it does take the efforts from community members and an interest in our community, and that's what I want to promote as the Commonwealth's attorney.
What is your stance on the use of diversion programs for nonviolent offenders as an alternative to incarceration?
Individuals. Now, what we do, you know, legally, they just can't have a felony within the last 10 years, but it's kind of been our opinion that if they have any felony at all, we look at a case. Now, also, I'm not saying that anybody with their criminal history is. If it's somebody that's had felonies before, but it was just a D felony, and I don't say just to minimize that, but if it's one of the lower level offenses, but I'm probably not going to be so in history, then I'd like to take that in consideration, because being a convicted felon, it does put a burden on somebody. But if I think that they could be productive, know what it is, it's essentially a form of probation where they have to follow certain rules, and then at the end of it, if they can successfully complete it, then
statutory requirements for pretrial diversion. And you know, I could get into all the legalese of that, but basically it's someone that has not had a felony. It's appropriate, and when someone is eligible for it, because during that diversion period, they have that jail time hanging over their head, and there might be other conditions or something that a victim's owed that money. So if someone successfully completes diversion, then their felony's dismissed, and they're not a convicted felon. So they had that chance. They had that opportunity to try to get this off their record. And if they've gone several years, because that's typically the diversion term, is, you know, it can be for when someone qualifies for that.
How do you intend to tackle the intertwined issues of the opioid crisis, drug-related crimes, and recidivism rates, while also implementing effective rehabilitation programs for individuals who have completed their sentences?
We are office and substance abuse, and they meet the fourth Friday of every month at the Boyle County Health Department. And most months when you go to the ASAP meeting, it's standing room only. There's not a seat that's left in the room. You have mental health providers from so many different agencies. Many people come together and collaborate. And if elected Commonwealth attorney, I would connections, and you learn of these new programs that these providers are offering to our citizens and to the people that are just getting out of jail. And if you're involved in ASAP or other community organizations, because through ASAP I've also made the connection where I'm able to help with the homelessness task force and our mental health crisis response that Boyle County just got the grant for with our EMS. And through those connections, we're able to offer more, sit in the face of someone they know to contact. And I feel that those kind of connections and those resources are out there, and we need to take more advantage of them.
Mentioned it before, our drug court team. I think that's been a very successful program. We also on the drug court team, the county attorney's offices are also members, but we haven't had a member from the county attorney's office attend those as well. So it is offered probation, and their term of probation is to successfully complete drug court. It's an 18-month program where they have to call every day at 6 a.m. and see if they have to drug test, and then they also have to attend their group meetings. They have to attend their individual counseling meetings. They have to get a job. They have to do community service. If they don't have a GED, they have to try to obtain their GED. So there are several different aspects of the drug court program that we're seeing. If they mess up, if they fail a drug screen, if they sometimes there's a where we maybe send them for 3 or 6 days for them, and it's kind of as a wake-up call to them, like, hey, if you don't straighten up, you don't take this program seriously, then you are facing this jail time that's hanging over your head. So I want to continue working with our drug court program because we are seeing success rates. We just celebrated at times, but then they successfully graduated. And then this August, we have another graduation. So we're seeing the success. We're seeing these individuals implement themselves back into our society.
What measures will you take to ensure equal treatment and justice for all individuals, regardless of race, ethnicity, or socioeconomic status?
Well, whenever we look at cases, one thing I never look at is their race, their ethnicity, their gender, their socioeconomic status. I just look at it, did this person commit a crime? Okay, check. Then what are the allegations of the crime? Is there a victim involved? What is that victim's stance on pre-trial release, on bond? I look at all those different factors, but one thing that never comes to my mind is what is their race or their socioeconomics. Not doing my job. So our victims are heard. It's not, and will they face justice by making them
14 years. And public defenders represent people that cannot afford an attorney because our Constitution requires that someone and economic status. I try to be very mindful of these things. I don't look at someone's race and think, oh, things that we're requiring of them. Are they able to pay for drug treatment? Are they able to pay for mental health treatment? Do they have Medicaid? Do they have Medicare? I try to think of all of those things. As a county attorney, I went to a similar one that was a reentry simulator. And in both of those experiences, you had the persona of someone that had just been fired from their minimum wage job and how they needed to pay each bill each month, or someone that had just got out of prison and they left prison with $100 in their pocket, but they've got to pay rent and they've got to pay child support and they've got to pay a probation fee. So I try to be very mindful of that because a lot of the people that we see through the court system do have that struggle, and I don't want to set anyone up for failure. I don't want to ask someone to pay, $300 a month for restitution to a victim, and them not have the money because they get a check where they get, $700 a month. So that's something that I definitely keep in mind.
What steps will you take to increase transparency and accountability within the Commonwealth Attorney's Office?
And you'll see, Danville Police will post they arrested someone. They'll post pictures of, drugs that were confiscated or a blurb about something that happened. And all of our local law enforcement officers do that, and people comment on these posts. They share these posts. That gets people talking. But then you never find out what happened after that. Months on down the road, you've forgotten about, the person that was caught with, pounds of. And I remember reading the Advocate Messenger and, what someone got, what their sentence was, but I've not seen that in a long time. So if elected Commonwealth Attorney, I want to be more transparent. You'll initially hear what happens, but then you don't hear anything, what happens with the case from court. So I think just being more open and honest to that as well.
I see other Commonwealth Attorneys' offices that do post media. So I do want to open that up and use that as a tool. It is a tool, but one thing I've learned doing door-to-door campaigning is that social media doesn't necessarily reach everyone. And so I want to be able to, still be open and honest. But the other thing is with our victims, we have to be open and transparent. That's one of the biggest ways we can be transparent with our victims, letting them know, we have Wendy Allen in our office, and she's here tonight, and I told her I would talk about her as well. But as soon as we get an indictment, she's on the phone, if they have a phone number, she's trying to contact them. She's sending out a letter. She's sending them the Marcy's Law packet. It's all about communication with our victims and being transparent, knowing what's coming for their case, what they're to expect, what the judge might rule on a case. So that's one way to also be transparent. Also, whenever I talk with me, I've told Wendy, and she knows and she holds me to it. If they want to talk to me and she tells me that, hey, this person probably needs to get an update from you, I call them from my cell phone, because I give every victim that wants to talk to me, I give them my cell phone, because I want them to know day or night, because sometimes you might be late at night or text me or email me. So I think that's the other way, is to be open and transparent, is just letting the victim, the best ability is availability. And so I want to be available to our victims.
Particularly regarding issues of bail reform and pretrial detention.
Nationally, and usually it's in some of the or no money bail system, and it's appalling because they're even applying it to violent offenders. And it's how are we supposed to trust an individual, one, that's committed a crime? And yes, I know they are still innocent until they're proven guilty, but the fact is if I've got a bloody victim right here, I think it's pretty evident that something happened to that victim, and if they believe that this individual committed it, and if they're just able to just sign out of jail, how am I supposed to guarantee that that victim's protected? And how am I supposed to guarantee, if they have nothing posted for it, how are we supposed to guarantee that they're going to show up for court and not just bolt and wait until they're found? So in terms of bail reform, I'm opposed, because frankly, at the end of the day, they need to have some stake in their case, so that they know that they're going to show up, and they know they have a responsibility, because frankly, we see individuals sometimes that are able to sign themselves out, and we never hear from them again. We sometimes have cases from 2013 that finally that person's been picked up. They've moved on with their life, but they never showed up because they skipped bail. So. And in terms of pretrial detention, again, I know I keep harping on, but I mean, they're the reason why we do this job, is our victims. It's talking with them and getting their opinion. When we go to arraignments, we have somebody charged with an offense where there is a victim. The judge will put the onus on us to contact that victim and get their position within 24 hours, so that we can effectively and efficiently move cases along. So I think it's, again, just communications with our victims.
While bonds and bail are primarily a judicial function, or when setting a bond, one of my primary functions that I do in the county attorney's office is every Tuesday morning we have a jail docket. It's arraignments of people that have been arrested in the past week prior. So tomorrow morning at 10:30, I'll have a jail docket. And this afternoon, I spent time preparing for it, like I do every Monday afternoon. And I look at the docket. Okay, this defendant right here, he's charged with a violent crime. Should this person be let out of jail? Another county, should that person be out of jail? And then I look at the third person on the docket. This person's on supervised probation, and they violated probation by picking up a new offense. Does that person need out of jail? And my answer on most of those is no, they don't, because there are very important reasons why we agree to let someone out of jail. And the two main things that the bonds are good for is, one, so that someone does not get out on one case and reoffend by picking up another. And second, that they come back to court like they're supposed to. And our pretrial officers do these interviews. They have set criteria, set matrices that determine someone's risk level, and we take those into account. So if someone is low risk, if they're statistically shown not to reoffend and to come back to court, and that they're not a danger to our community, then yes, absolutely, let that person have a chance out of jail. But if it's a violent offense, if it's someone that is shown that if you let me out, I'm going to go and commit another crime, or I'm going to go and violate my bond conditions by having contact with a victim, then those people need to stay in jail. So I agree with Justin. I don't believe in the no bond or the no cash bond system that some other states have implemented, because it's not appropriate for Danville or Harrodsburg in our communities. What's appropriate is that the violent offenders and the people that don't listen to the rules stay in jail where they belong while their case is pending.
How do you plan to collaborate with other organizations and agencies, including law enforcement, both within and outside the judicial system, to address systematic issues and improve outcomes for our community?
As I mentioned before, you know, the connections that I've made with ASAP has really helped on, regardless of how it's changed in the Commonwealth Attorney's Office. Because I've found that after all these years, I'm not a mental health expert. I'm not a substance abuse expert. I feel like I know some things, but in order to help someone with substance abuse disorder or any kind of mental health conditions, that they're getting that appropriate treatment, and we leave that to the professionals. So by having those connections and those collaborations and being able to just sit down and talk to people, you know, you started a new program, tell me about it. We have people that come in our office frequently. And being open to those connections and building that sense of community helps, because at the end of the day, most of the people that we see in court are our neighbors, they're our relatives, they're people that are not going to spend the rest of their life locked up in prison, and we want to be able to offer them the tools that they need so that they can stay out of jail and stop offending, stop committing crimes so that they're not repeat offenders. And if we can offer those resources so that we don't keep seeing them over and over again, it's important to have that collaboration.
You know, there's that word collaboration. You know, as I stated, it takes, I mean, they're coming out and they may not have anything, but it's going to take effective collaboration. You know, Sarah talked about the Rocket DACA program, and I think what the Boyle County Attorney's Office has been doing is fine, except sometimes there have been issues where an individual does fail, and then the case is sent up to us, and then I see Bree Curtis in our office. She's our Commonwealth detective, and she's in charge of getting discovery, and sometimes we do have issues of getting certain in Lincoln County, where you have somebody from our office that's also part-time with the county attorney's office that attends these preliminary hearing dockets, and they make the best offer that they would receive in circuit court. It could be a diversion so that they can get the case dismissed. It could be probation if they've got some felonies. It's usually going to lead to some sort of probation or a diversion, and then that way conditioned upon them going and successfully completing treatment of that individual vacation here, you know, when it comes to these issues.
What is your vision for the future of the criminal justice system in the 50th District of Kentucky? And how do you plan to work towards that vision if elected Commonwealth Attorney?
Well, my vision would be to live in a community where my job is not needed. But that would be an idealistic vision. I'm more of the mindset that a realistic vision would be a community where drug traffickers and violent offenders do not think this is a safe community for them. Frankly, 85 to 90% of our cases, and that's just a guesstimate just based on my experience in the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, are drug offenses or drug related. You know, your thefts, even your violent offenses, they're related to drugs. And the people that are peddling our drugs, that are selling these drugs, I want them behind bars. I don't want them to think, oh, well, let's go to Boyle because they're easier on us. We can probably get off with a probation or something. No, I want them behind bars because I'm tired of it. Our officers are tired of it, and the community's tired of it. And frankly, I've got 2 young daughters. I don't want them growing up in this community if there's drugs everywhere. There's drugs in our schools, and it's scary. It is. And so I want drug traffickers and violent offenders. If you're a violent offender, you don't deserve anywhere except behind bars to serve your sentence. So that's the kind of the idea I would have for the criminal justice in this community, is just to make sure that this is the safest community in Central Kentucky, and Kentucky for that matter.
Communities. I've, you know, attended several community functions through my role in the county attorney's office. You know, we put out pinwheels for CASA. We go to the Earth Day festivities that they had at the Extension Center a couple of weeks ago. We've been active in a lot of those things, and I'd like to see the Commonwealth Attorney's Office to have more of a presence in our community for those events. The second part is I want to see more of the people that need to be in jail stay in jail. I want to see more of the persistent felony offender statute being used because, as I said, I prep the docket each week, and I look and I see the same names over and over again. Someone that has 10 felonies and has picked up their 11th felony. I want to see that someone that keeps on committing crimes against the citizens of Boyle and Mercer counties to be held accountable. Our legislature recently passed the Safer Kentucky Act, where there's kind of a 3 strikes sentencing for violent offenders. I plan on utilizing that because one day I'm looking at the jail docket and I see someone that is charged with something that should be a second or greater offense. I want to make sure that that person is properly prosecuted and that when their case ends up in circuit court that they're not given an amendment to lower their charges. I want to see that the people that commit crimes against our children, our elderly, our women, our vulnerable populations are held accountable. And I want to see that the people that keep getting in trouble over and over again are looking at stiffer sentences than what I've seen in the past. So that's my vision for the Commonwealth Attorney's Office.
And this is our last question before.
Experience. I'm older than Justin is. I've been practicing longer. I've been doing this for 17 years, almost 17 years now, and I've done exclusively criminal law. I've tried dozens of cases. I've taken murder cases to trial, more than one. And granted, a lot of my trial experiences as a defense attorney, but I think that's my superpower because I know what tricks these pesky defense attorneys use in court. I know what it's like to work with expert witnesses. I know what it's like to work on a death-eligible case. I mediated one in Wolfe County when I was a public defender. We don't get those a lot around here, and a lot of our local attorneys just haven't had that experience, and I have. And as a public defender, I worked in multiple jurisdictions, and I've seen things that worked because, you know, I chose to be a public defender. I chose to be a prosecutor. These are public service jobs where I make a lot less money than if I worked in a big law firm because that's a choice I made. Because I want to serve my community, I want to be a public servant. So to me, that is my biggest strength.
You know, my biggest strength, I would say, is also experience. You know, Sarah talks about the years of experience that she has, and she does. I think it's also quality of experience. You know, I've served, the majority of my time as an attorney has been as a prosecutor. I started out in the county attorney's office. I've worked as a defense attorney. I'm now working in the Commonwealth Attorney's Office currently over in Harrodsburg. So I understand the communities. I've been working over in Harrodsburg, so I've been working in both communities, advocating for our victims and making sure that victims or defendants in both cases are prosecuted. So I think it's just my quality, my experience, and just you know, that prosecutorial mindset. You know, whenever Mr. Bottoms received funding for the full-time assistant position, it was me. I was his first call. So I think it's just the quality of experience and being, you know, I've been involved with every aspect of the criminal justice system except for the judge up until it gets to an appellate level. So I understand each level, and I'm well-rounded. I've been in private practice. You know, I did elder law, did probates and estates, and, you know, in my experience with elder law, you know, I would see individuals, some of our elderly individuals, financially abused, and I worked with them to make sure to try to come up with a plan to help them prepare for what's next after that. So I think it's just, you know, quality of my experience, just being able, having that private practice to still do other areas of law so that I can use that also. I mean, there's several times where we might have a case that deals with property issues, and so I have to use that experience as well. So I think it's just, we're both very experienced candidates, and I think that's just one of the reasons that I think I'm the more qualified candidate.
Thank you. Each candidate will be provided 2 minutes for a closing. Because our first question went to Justin Johnson, Sarah Bryant will have the first go at closing.
Thank you. I would ask for your vote because a vote for Sarah Bryant is a vote for experience. Like I said just a minute ago, I've been practicing criminal law for 17 years now. As a public defender, I used to get asked, should I just hire a, quote, real attorney? And of course, a public defender is a real attorney. But I would kind of, at first I would get offended, but then I would give this analogy. If you have a heart problem, are you going to go see a cardiologist or are you going to see a general practitioner? And I imagine most of you all would say that you would see the cardiologist. I equate myself to kind of a cardiologist of law. I've been doing criminal law my entire career. That's my passion. You know, you can talk to me about a case, a true crime podcast, a documentary, and I'm passionate about it because that's my interest. That's what I've chosen to do with my life and my career. And my experiences made, like I said, I could write a book of all the things that I've seen and experienced in court over the years. A vote for me is a vote for someone that's community-oriented, and I love my community. I've been on boards of treatment centers. I'm on committees through, like I said, the Homelessness Coalition. I'm on a committee for our new crisis response team through the Boyle County EMS. I'm involved, and I would carry that on to the Commonwealth Attorney's Office as well. Like I said, I've been doing this for so long, and I've seen what works and what doesn't, and I've got fresh ideas and a fresh perspective. And the fact that I not only changed careers in political parties after a lot of years has shown my openness to other viewpoints and openness to changing how I view the world. So I would just ask for your vote on May 21st. Thank you.
You know, in 1976, the Kentucky Supreme Court issued an opinion wherein they stated that one of the finest offices the public can give to a member of the legal profession is Commonwealth Attorney. Its very status becomes a mantle of power and respect. Few are apt to take it lightly. Some forget. However, some also never learn how to wear it humbly. Now, I'm not going to stand up here and say that I'm going to be humble or I'm going to wear the title humbly, because frankly, if somebody goes around saying they're humble, they're more than likely not humble. Instead, I'm going to do what I've always done and let my actions speak for themselves. You know, as I mentioned, when I first started out as an attorney, I started out as an assistant county attorney. Unfortunately, my boss had to take a leave of absence for health reasons, leaving me the only attorney left in the office. But I embraced that challenge. I continued prosecuting hundreds of cases, conducting several bench trials and jury trials. I then went into private practice and gained a defense perspective so that I can be a better prosecutor, know where the weaknesses are in a case so I can present the strongest case to a jury. Now, I might have been tough on Richie, but I guess I showed respect enough to where he hired me when he was offered funding for the first full-time assistant position. You know, this office requires somebody that cares about this community and has an investment in it and the future of it. You know, as an attorney, I've served as a deacon at Lexington Avenue Baptist Church. I've served as Paravel's city attorney. I've been a vice president of our local Gideon's camp. And also, one other title that I'm always going to be proud of is that of dad. It's a title that it's my proudest title. I've got two very young girls, and I know I keep saying it over and over, but they're my pride and joy. And I want the safest community for them. And so on May 21st, when Boyle and Mercer Countyans get the chance to do something they haven't in 24 years, elect a new Commonwealth Attorney, I ask that you consider me, Justin Johnson, to be your next Commonwealth Attorney.
Thank you for joining us this evening for our debate that we've had for our two Republican candidates for Commonwealth Attorney. The election as the primary takes place on March 21st. And thank you all for joining us this evening, and good night.